Hi, and welcome to the Dog Sports Decoded podcast. My name is Megan Ritchie, and today I wanted to try to tackle agility training on your own and coursework. So, in this podcast, I hope to cover how you can start practicing agility on your own outside of class, where you can find courses to practice, and what kinds of courses to practice, and how to read course maps. So, let's dive in. If you've taken agility training classes, and I wouldn't recommend you start agility practices on your own before you take a class. You definitely want to do some classwork to cover how to safely use all the obstacles and to teach you some of the handling skills you're going to need. So I wouldn't recommend just sort of winging it. But once you've taken a few classes, at some point you're probably going to want to start to practice on your own to get a little bit of practice outside of class. So that might be renting a training facility or purchasing your own agility equipment. I think Outward Hound carries a really inexpensive kit you can use. It's mostly PVC pipes to set up jumps, so you can take them and practice them anywhere. So at some point, to get better and improve, you're going to want to start to practice on your own outside of classes, likely. So I wanted to cover some skills that would help you do that. So if you're at that point, you've taken the classes, but you're not quite sure where to start, that's what I wanted to cover today. So typically, if you've been to an agility class, as you work your way up the levels, typically what I've seen the instructors do is set up a basic course. And throughout the class, you're just going to practice those obstacles either in one continuous course or break it down into chunks and maybe switch up little pieces depending on how the dogs in class are doing. So that's probably what you're going to want to do in your own practice. So that might be setting up a very small course and practicing a specific skill like going behind an obstacle or doing distance work or something like that. Or it might just be setting up a whole course and practicing. So that's kind of what we're going to cover today, is more a whole course. That's what I've seen more at a beginner type level, which I would consider myself, versus doing specific drills to work on specific skills. So in my mind, when you're just starting, typically the hardest thing to do is to figure out where you need to be, your own footwork, how to handle your dog through a course, and then of course remember a course. So typically when you're just starting, I think that's where you are going to find yourself practicing, is just that coursework, how to memorize a course and how to run it and position yourself so you're in the right spot to guide your dog. So that's what we're going to cover, courses. So the obvious question then is, where can you find courses to start? So I'd say there's a few different resources you can go to. If you are in a class, you can certainly ask your instructor or take a picture of course that they have set up. You can also attend a local agility event. Often they will post courses on the wall that the competitors will be running. So even if you're not ready to compete yourself, you can certainly go and spectate and just take a picture of the courses that they are running. So that is certainly a possibility. I wanted to flip you over to a couple other resources though that are at your disposal. So this is a favorite of mine, this agilitycoursemaps.com. And what I really like about their website, as you can see, they have broken down quite a bit of the course maps. They've got a ton of maps available. But you can see it's broken down by organization. So if you are running a specific organization, you can search by that. You can also search by the level of the dog. So if you are brand new and listening to this, you're probably going to be running at a starter's level. Especially if you have not competed before, you will definitely be at a starter's level. And then they also have these class divisions. So you might see some of these classes change. Depending on the organization, some of the names change, but these are some courses, different types of classes you might run. So just different divisions, they have different, so where the level is your skill level, I'll say, and the titling level, the class is the type of course you'll run. So what obstacles are included, how you score points, or what timing is allowed. So that's primarily what I'm going to talk about today. You can see they also have show date. So if you want to pick a more current type of course that judges are running today, you could search by show date. You could also search by judge or club. Today we're not going to focus on that. We're just going to look basically at the level. So you could filter this by level just by hitting that and searching for the level you're in. You can also search by class. So these levels and classes become important as we're starting, obviously. So as I suggested, if you're just starting out, you've not competed before, you're just starting to compete, you'll be looking for this starters level. And then for the classes, I typically recommend either jumpers, standard, or gamblers. So what I did when I started trialing Tess, because we were brand new, I didn't want to enter too many classes in a day. I didn't want to overwhelm either of us. It's a lot of stress when you're just starting. So for myself, I really like standard and jumpers. So when I started with Tess again, our weaves weren't very strong, and standard does have weaves in the course. So what I typically did is I planned to, I'll say, compete in the jumpers. So that was the one I was really going for. And then I treated standard as just sort of a practice, kind of a confidence boost for both of us, knowing we weren't going to get the weaves part right away. So if that's kind of your situation, that was kind of my thought process. Gamblers is another one people really like because there really is no set course. You know, the obstacles are set out in a specific place, so you'll see a course map in that sense. But other than a couple mandatory obstacles at the end, there is no set course per se. So, you know, the obstacles are out there, and then you can send your dog to whatever obstacle you want to collect points depending on how many points each obstacle has. A certain number of points as kind of value. So, you know, if you take a jump, it'll have so many points. If you do a dog walk, it'll have so many points. So the idea is to get as many points as you can in the time allotted, and then there's a mandatory distance component at the very end that you have to do. So you can do whatever you want within your course time, as long as you end on and complete the final obstacles. So so for some beginners, they find that much easier. They're not worried about remembering a course. They just have to send their dog over whatever obstacles and then finish the last 3. So the only part you would have to memorize is the last 3. So some people really find that helpful because they're not stressed out about remembering the course. I was sort of the opposite. I was like, well, I won't know what to do out there, and I won't know what to take, and so I haven't done gamblers myself. But those would be the 3 I would recommend starting at. So if we flip back here, so this Agility Course Maps is a great resource that you can use. So again, if it was me, I would just find one that says it's a starter's level, and then under classes, I would look for jumpers, standard, or gambler. So that's what I would look for, and then you can just hit view here, and it will pull up the course map for you. So from here, I think you can save the photos here. Yeah, I can download the map here. But this is just a really great resource. It's a way, so if you're renting a training hall, you've got kind of an example that you can follow to set up. So when I've set them up for myself, I haven't worried too much about exactly pacing the courses out when I set them up. I would just look at the map and kind of judge as best I can for the space available, you know, how I can set it up to match this map. So so that's one resource you can go to, is this agilitymaps.com. They also have a Facebook page. I believe they're the same. So you can go on Facebook and find that. Another good website you can take advantage of is Agility Nerd. To me, when I've looked at that, it looks more like specific drills you can do. But if you're at a little higher skill level and you want to practice specific skills, that's a great resource to you. They also provide a ton of valuable information on how to read courses and things like that. So Agility Nerd is also a great resource that you can take advantage of. And I've also seen maps on Pinterest or just searching Google Images. So there's a few different methods that you can use to find course maps. And those would be the ones that I would recommend. Again, I really like this Agility Course Maps. Just because it's so simple to find courses to practice that are at your skill level and the specific class that you want to enter. So that's what I would recommend. So I know some of this terminology can be a little intimidating, so I just found a couple videos on YouTube, and I thought I would just show them to you to show what the differences in the classes are. So this is just a starter's standard agility, so we'll just hit play here. And you can see what it's going to look like. So he's at the start line. That first judge is where the timing is going to start on his run. And So you can see this again is standard, so standard course involves all of the agility equipment. So we've got the dog walk, tunnels, jumps. Onto the table. The dog's got to wait there for 5 seconds. A release over the jump. And then we're going to attempt the weaves. He's had to redo the weaves, so that's allowed in starter. Jump, tire. You can see he lost his dog's attention, which again, very common in when we're just starting out. Alright, so that was standard, and now we are going to go to a jumpers. So jumpers, in my experience, much simpler course. As I mentioned, this is kind of the one that I was going for when I was competing with Tess. And it doesn't have all the obstacles. So typically just the jumps and the tunnels, as the name might invoke. You do have to watch the organization you're playing with. Some of them do have weave poles. But again, this is a little faster course to run, and doesn't have all the obstacles. So if your dog isn't confident on all the obstacles, jumpers can be a good one to either practice or compete in. So there we go. All right, and lastly, this is a gamble run. So we'll just hit play. And again, in gamble, you it's make your own course. So you can see there is a set course and obstacles set up, obviously, but it's up to you how you interact with them. And again, each obstacle is given a certain number of points. So typically, if your dog is confident in the obstacles that have a higher point value, you'll redo those as often as possible to get a higher score. But if your dog isn't good at a certain obstacle, like say a teeter-totter, you can skip it. And then you can see at the end, this is the mandatory course she has to run. And I'm just going to pause it here. If you see this red line taped next to the judge, next to the jump here in the middle, that's sort of the distance portion of gamble. So she actually has to stand behind that tape when sending her dogs through these final obstacles. So that is gamble. So it's just a nice game if you're stressed out, competing, worrying about doing a course. This one, very few mandatory, set portion of the course that you have to remember. So that's kind of a nice option. All right, so we've talked about, when you might want to start to use some of your own courses and do your own practicing. If you're feeling like you're doing well in class, but you'd like to get a little more practice in and maybe compete, it's time to probably start to practice on your own a little bit. So now we've known kind of what type of classes are available. So we've got our standard, our jumper, gamble. There's a bunch of other classes as well, but that's where you might want to start. And then again, we're starting at the starters level, but obviously as you earn your qualifying scores and your titles, you're going to bump up to more difficult levels. But that's where we're going to start. So I've shown you a couple places you can find courses to practice. Again, primarily here with agilitycoursemaps.com. So now we've found our courses, we need to know how to practice them. So I'm going to flip over here to this one from Agility Course Maps. And you can see, I just kind of want to walk you through how to read these. So again, if you're setting it up in a practice scenario, I wouldn't worry so much about pacing these out exactly, just kind of roughly set them up. But I want to show you how to kind of look at a course map and kind of either walk it in your head to memorize it, or to kind of figure out what to do when you're practicing here. So I'm just going to, I think, cover what some of these are pretty obvious as far as what they represent on the map, but I'm just going to walk it through. So you can see in the bottom right hand corner there's a jump there, so that's what the one that kind of looks like a barbell is, and that's labeled number 1, and it's got S's. So that's your starting point. That's where the clock is going to start when you are competing. So that's where you're going to put your dog behind that jump. So in this case, it'd be, probably placing your dog somewhere around that little number 10 and have them kind of sit, stay to prepare to go through the course. So that's where you're going to start. And then you can see the next obstacle is labeled number 2. Sorry, the mouse there is doing funny things. Is labeled number 2, and that would be your tire. So you can see the design is a little bit different than the jump barbell, which is number 1. And from number 2, we're going to go to number 3, another jump. 4 is the tunnel. And then just looking at the end of the course here, if we drop it down to the bottom left-hand corner is number 14, and that would be a long jump. So, so those are kind of what some of the maps would mean. Maybe we'll go look at a standard map here for a second. So on this one, on the right-hand side, you can see number 2 is a dog walk. Number 5 would be an A-frame, and then 11 there would be the table. So that's kind of how you'd read these. And then on here, it looks like the tire jump is number 1 in the bottom right-hand corner. So that's how you'd read the map here. In this instance. So it's obviously, if you're printing a course map and setting it up, you need to know what these little diagrams look like and what all the little symbols are. All right, so we're going to go back to our jumpers course here. So let's say you're in the practice session, you've set this up, and now we need to kind of memorize the course. So typically what I've done in classes that I've gone to, so where we've had an instructor, she would take a course like this. So this one is 14 obstacles to our course, and she'd break it in half. So we're just going to do the first 7 obstacles, I'll say in order, as a block, and do that first with our first run through, and then the second time we practice, let's say, we might run through the last 7 obstacles. So that's just an easy way you can kind of break it down if you're just starting. So we're going to do the first half of the course and not worry about the second half of the course just yet. So so it's kind of a good way to piecemeal your training time. So in this case, again, we're going to start at the number 1, have our dog in a sit stay, go over the jump. So this is where, kind of as you're planning your course, how you're going to handle your dog, you really want to pay attention to where you're going to be. So if I was running this with Tess, let's say, I would have her in a sit stay somewhere around that number 10 marker, ready to do her first jump, and I'm going to have her on my right hand side. So I'm going to use my right hand to kind of direct her. It's pretty much a straight line from 1, 2, 3, 4 into the tunnel. So if I keep her on my right hand side, I can just run along with her. I could stand, if they have a good sit stay and don't need a lot of support, you could easily stand at number 2 or even 3. And just call your dog over the jumps. But assuming we're a little more beginnerish, I'm probably going to be pretty close to her and just have her on my right hand side. So I'm just going to ask her to jump 1, 2, 3, call 4 into the tunnel, and then at that point I'm going to switch sides. So as she's running through the tunnel, I'm going to do kind of a rear cross, and now I want her on my left hand side coming out of the tunnel. So coming out of the tunnel, I'm going to have her on my left. We're going to go over the jump number 5 there, and then I'm going to push her into the tunnel, again still using my left hand. I'm going to do another rear cross, so now I want her on my right hand side coming out of that tunnel, and we're going to finish with that number 7 jump in the middle. So those would be, as I'm planning my course for that first half, that's where I would do my crosses and switch hands. So I think that's what I would suggest when I look at this, and that's what I would practice. So I would, if I was renting a training hall, doing this on my own, I would practice exactly that. Finish at number 7 there, kind of reevaluate, did we have any trouble with anything? Did that go fine? If it went fine, maybe we'll run it through one more time, and then I would move on to the second half of the course. So from there, again, I could just start at, probably start at number 7 there. At this point, I would want her on my left-hand side. So in the prior portion, I'm telling you I'm going to have her on my right-hand side coming out of that tunnel over the jump 7. But now as I finish the other half of the course, I actually want her on my left side. So again, practice-wise, I'm going to have her sit about halfway between the tunnel, be on our right here as we're looking at the screen, but that number 6 tunnel, and then I'm going to have her sit halfway in between, sit, stay. I'm going to ask her, she'll be on my left hand side, I'm going to ask her to go over that number 7 jump, and then we're going to move to the number 8 jump, number 9 jump as kind of a pinwheel, and then into the tunnel. So from there, that's all on my left hand side, so I don't have to switch sides there. Coming out of the tunnel, we're going to go over that jump in the middle again, which was our number 7, now our number 11, and push her into the tunnel. So all of that's with her on my left hand side. I'm going to do a rear cross in the tunnel. So as she's coming out of the tunnel, she'll be now on my right hand side. We're going to go over jump 13 and then over jump 14 to finish. And you can see that little F there in the circle to indicate that that's where time will finish. So again, I would just practice those last 7 obstacles in our training time. Again, if there's any problems, we can go back and tweak things. If for some reason, they're sucking into the tunnel and I want them to do a jump, we can kind of work on some of that, some of those skills. And as you're doing this, you can certainly push yourself to work more from a distance and things like that. So that's how we break it down. So assuming we've done both halves now kind of correctly to where we're happy with them, now I would try and run the whole course. So this is where, we might have to change our thinking. But again, if I'm starting at number 1, I'm not going to handle that any differently. I think the only hiccup we had was at that kind of number 7 jump. So if I'm starting, I'm going to have my dog on my right hand side, go over jump 1, 2, 3, 4 into the tunnel. I'm going to switch. Now the dog will be on my left hand side, go over jump 5, push into the tunnel. Now I'm going to do a rear cross so the dog is on my left side to go over jump 7, kind of do the pinwheel for jump 7, 8, 9, 10 into the tunnel. So that's all on my left hand side. I want to switch now, do another cross, rear cross, front cross, whichever is easier for you. I want my dog on my right hand side, over jump 10 into the tunnel, 12, and then over jump 13 and 14. So that last little bit's all going to be on my right hand side. So as we walk through that, I think that's 3 crosses we're going to have to do. And again, so you're just going to have to think about, how fast is my dog? Where do I have to place myself to give myself time to do those crosses? And as I'm looking at this, most of this is going to be pretty easy. The big challenge where I would see, I'm going to have to be fast or really watch my footwork is coming out of tunnel number 6, doing a cross into start that 7, 8, 9 pinwheel. So that's what's looking like the bigger challenge to me as I'm looking at this course, where might be the sticky point. So I might have to practice that cross 2 or 3 times to get that whole course right. And I could just piecemeal that. So if that's the part I'm having trouble with, I wouldn't run and tire out my dog crazily as I practice and make them run the whole course over and over and over again. I might just piecemeal that, over jump 5 into the tunnel 6, front cross 7, 8, 9. I might just practice that a few times until we're good at it. So again, if we're training on our own, maybe we've rented a facility for an hour, that's how we're going to break it down. That first 7 obstacles, second 7 obstacles, and then the whole course. Now, if your dog still has some gas in their tank and you still have some time on your rental, you could flip that around and now run the course backwards. So you don't have to move all your heavy obstacles around. You can just do it in reverse. So instead of finishing at number 14, let's say we start there, I could have the dog on the left hand side. I could do jump 14, 13 into the tunnel, kind of where it says 4, all on the left hand side. Over jump 5 into the tunnel 6, pick up the dog, and just kind of keep going with that. But you could break that down again. Let's say what is on here, obstacle 14 to 7. I could do that in reverse and then do 7 to 1. And so I could piecemeal that again, and then I could run the whole thing in reverse again. So that's how I would break down a practice session if it was me. And it's just kind of a quick, fun way to get your practice in and start to build your own skill set when it comes to okay, I've set up my course. How do I need to handle this? with my dog, what are going to be the sticking points for us in a particular course, and just kind of practice remembering courses themselves. Uh, it's shocking how quickly in a class you can forget, as you're waiting for your next turn, like, oh, okay, what obstacle came after that, and things like that. So it's good to start to build those kind of memorization skills as you go. All right, so quickly, if I want to cover just some tips to help you remember the course, I think the breakdown we've walked through is a helpful way to remember. So you're breaking it in half. You only have to remember 7 at a time, and then as you piece it together, you kind of can remember from your prior trips, kind of some muscle memory there for your handling. Another way I've heard, I find it's easier for me to remember it on paper and then go walk the course. So if you have rented the hall, I might print this out the night before and kind of, visualize it before I ever get to the training hall. Just kind of visualize it and try and memorize it. And then again, it looks very different when you see it in person. So I would kind of walk the course like you would if you're competing, just practice without your dog. So, okay, I've got my dog on my right hand side here. I'm going to do my cross here. And, just kind of visualize it without your dog, and then bring your dog out and go and run the course and give it a try. Another tip I've heard for other sort of memorization type things is to work your way backwards. So if I was trying to remember this for a competition, I'm going to start at jump 14 and build from there. So as you add jumps, in theory, you're making your memory stronger at the very end of the course, where it's typically hardest to remember. So you could start remembering it backwards, so to speak. So whatever you find helpful, but I definitely find it helpful to visualize quite a bit ahead of time. If you can watch dogs at a competition run it in front of you, sometimes that's helpful, and it can be helpful to walk the course and see what other competitors are doing, especially if they are more experienced than you. You can see as they walk the course where they are putting in their crosses and how they're handling it, because people will kind of do that as they walk the course before the competition. There's always kind of a course walking time where you can walk the course yourself and see competitors do it. So sometimes that can be helpful, because sometimes they will do things and you go, oh, I never would have thought to do it there, but that makes so much sense. But do be careful if you're watching prior competitors. Not a big deal for a practice like this or in a training class, but if the competitor in front of you does something wrong and then you think like, oh, well, they must know what they're doing, so I'm going to do it that way too, they could be off course, they could be totally wrong and disqualified. So don't pay too much attention when you're competing to what people are doing. But if you're walking the course, sometimes that can help to see what other people do. So I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about today. I hope that helps you if you are setting up a practice time for yourself to go get a little bit more experience, and you're thinking about competing and you just want to get a little more practices in outside of your class. So I hope this gives you a couple resources to help you do that if you're not quite sure how to structure your own practice time. So just kind of to summarize, typically what I've seen in classes is just setting up a course like this, like we've talked about today, chunking that course into 2 or 3 pieces, practice each piece at a time, then try and string the whole thing together. And typically if you're just practicing with one dog, that's going to take you your 1 hour rental time by the time you run through each bit. And if there's specific problems you're having with certain obstacles, we didn't talk about it too much. There's certainly lots of problems you could have on course, but in this one we didn't deal with dog walk issues and things like that. So where if you want your dog to do a dog walk, but there's a tunnel next door and they're sucking into the tunnel, there might be some pieces there that you have to pull out and do some troubleshooting and little drills like that. So calling your dog away from a tunnel to do a dog walk, let's say. But this course that we walked through is pretty straightforward, pretty simple. So that's the way we want it when we're just starting. So I hope that helps you structure your own practice time. So now you know where to find course maps that you can use for your training, how to kind of piecemeal and set up a little bit of a timeline for your practice to get the most use out of your practice time, and a couple different ideas of how you can teach yourself the course and remember the course, because that's definitely a stressful part of it, is to figure out how to stay on course and how to handle your dog through the course. So where you need to put your crosses in, and where you might need to move away from your dog a little bit to pull them off of an obstacle they might really like doing. I hope that gives you the confidence you need to start to get out there and practice on your own. It's not rocket science, really. You're probably going to mess up a whole lot along the way, like all of us do. But it's pretty simple. Just pull a course map, get out there and start to practice it, piecemeal it. Really the only way to get better doing this is just to practice it over and over and over again. And so you know how to read a course map so you can actually get out there and do it. So I hope that helps. And I will talk to you next week. Bye.